Commissioner, I think we're ready to begin.
Is the governor on?
No.
Okay, we can call the special meeting of the State Investment Council to order. And who is going to take the roll?
Jolene.
I'm sorry?
Commissioner, it's Jolene will be taking the roll.
Okay, Jolene, if you could take the roll to establish a quorum, please.
Good morning. Okay, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham. Vice Chair Stephanie Garcia Richard.
I'm here.
Okay, we have Treasurer Laura Montoya. Catherine Allen, member.
Here.
Member Tim Jennings. Okay. Member Harold Lavender.
I'm here.
Member John Bingaman.
Here.
Member Nick Tejas. Oh. Okay. Member Nick Tejas.
I'm here.
Member Michael Messina.
Here.
Member Kurt Sommer.
Here.
And we have Secretary Wayne Probst.
Present.
You have 7 in attendance. The quorum is established.
Okay, we'll go to the next item, agenda item 1B, which is the approval of our agenda. Does everyone have the agenda for the special meeting?
This is Harold. So move for approval.
Okay.
Second.
We've got a motion by Member Lavender. Second, Mr. Secretary or Mr. Summer? I did not see who seconded.
Kurt Sommer, seconded.
Okay. All right. Any discussion on the motion to approve the agenda? Hearing none, we're going to go to a roll call vote for approval of the agenda.
All right, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Treasurer Montoya. Oh, she's not present. Okay, I'm sorry. Secretary Probst.
Yes.
Okay. Member Kurt Sommer.
Yes.
Member Michael Messina.
Yes.
Member Catherine Allen.
Yes.
Member Harold Lavender.
Yes.
Member John Bingaman.
Yes.
Member Nick Tejas.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have all 8 in favor.
Okay, let's turn it over to our State Investment Officer on agenda item 2A for the State Investment Officer report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. I think you'll find it interesting that our net asset value for the funds this morning, as I usually report in my briefing each month, is $44,999,991,000. Couldn't get any closer to the 45 billion number. Anyway, that's really good to see. It's nice for each of you to be with us this morning. We appreciate it for this special meeting. Following the process that is specified by the Council-adopted Governance Committee Charter, I have advised the Governance Committee of my plan to retire as your State Investment Officer as of October 1. It has been a real honor to serve the Council and the state in this role, for which I am most grateful. The SIC is fortunate to have an outstanding staff, many of whom are with us in the room today, and they will continue to serve the Council and New Mexico very well as they have. During the September Council meeting, I'll offer some observations regarding the 13 years that I've served, and I'll also provide some ideas for what might be wise to consider in the future. You're now going to hear from the Governance Committee regarding the process the committee and the Council will follow to select the next state investment officer. Thank you.
So the governance committee met with Steve, and if we can say we don't want retirement, we would have done so. I know that it's well deserved, and Steve, you've done a fabulous job, not only in reestablishing a great reputation for the State Investment Council, the financial performance of the State Investment Council, the rules and policies, and you've also built a terrific team, and we will always be grateful for you for that. So I'm sorry to see you go, because you've done such a fabulous job in everything that you've done for the council, and I know you've done it out of love for our state. So I just want to say that, and thank you for everything you've done. And anybody else want to make some comments?
I'll jump in for a second. I've known Steve. I've almost been on the council as long as Steve has been the state investment officer. I started in August of 2011 or September of 2011. And the thing that the hallmark for me is integrity. Steve brought a level of integrity to the council that it had been sorely lacking in the X number of years prior to that. He brought stability. He brought Vince Smith, which may be one of his greatest accomplishments of all the things that he did, able to convince Vince to leave Kansas and come to New Mexico. But I think that, Steve, you deserve all the accolades you're going to get, and I guarantee you you're going to get some. I am privileged to have gotten to know you as a personal friend. I've been able to be with you on a number of occasions. And I think that I kind of had an inkling when I called about this meeting. I had an inkling that might be the subject matter because everyone was so circumspect. Charlie said, I can't talk. I just can't say anything. And I said, well, you know what? I'll bet you that. I know that, sunsets come. And I kind of thought that might be the case. But anyway, I just want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done, how much I like you, and how, again, for you, if I had everybody gets a chance to get one stamp, and your stamp is integrity. And that's the key to the whole thing as far as I'm concerned. So thanks for everything you've done.
Thank you, Harold. Thanks, Kathy.
Madam Chair.
Member Messina?
Thank you. Steve, I just want to reiterate everything Harold said. It's been an honor to be part of this with you. Thank you for everything, man.
I know we'll all have other things to say and notes to write to Steve, and we'll have to have some kind of a celebration, so not to worry about that. But the process that the governance committee, we met and came up with, and Kurt Summer has really taken the lead on this. So I'm going to have him, if it's all right, talk about what the governance committee is planning to do as a process, about the company we interviewed that would be helpful in identifying and recruiting state investment officers. And part of today, you all are going to be involved. You're going to be interviewed about what skill sets you think we need. You'll be involved in the sense of our final decisions. But again, it is a governance committee responsibility to both identify and interview and hire the new state investment officer. So Kurt, would you like to talk about the process?
Thank you, Kathy. First, as the newest member on this board, I'd like to reiterate, Steve, that you've brought a level of professionalism and to this committee, which is duly warranted, and have done a tremendous job for the benefit of the state. You're a tremendous loss to the state by virtue of your retirement, although well-deserved, not liked. I think I'm going to miss you. Anyway, notwithstanding that, let me tell you what we have talked about. And Huppendahl and Associates is the company that searched and found Vince. And so we went back and had a conversation with Huppendahl and company to see if they would be willing to engage in or enter into a contract with the State Investment Council to help find a replacement for Steve, as difficult a job as that will be. They have agreed to do so. And they have a process that they engage in, which will probably take anywhere from 12 to 14 weeks, is what Mr. Hoopendahl anticipates. That process would begin with interviewing the council members individually, if you're so willing, to get your feedback on what is necessary for this position, and putting together a position paper essentially for outlining the description of the job with the review of all your comments and suggestions. That position then would be description would then be brought back to the council, and then a search would begin. They will begin a search that is nationwide for the benefit of the council. That counts, then they will narrow down the scope and pass it on to the governance committee, and then allow the rest of from there, the governance committee will make recommendations to the full board for consideration, is what they propose. They have proposed a contract to us with a floor of $65,000 plus expenses, plus a percentage of the amount of the salary to be paid for the first year for whoever the candidate is. I will raise this at this point because I think it's important. Currently, the annual salary for the state investment officer is $319,186,000. That is low because the median salary for people in positions that Steve has held is roughly $515,000. And that raises concerns in terms of finding quality individuals out there in the public that we're having to compete with. Steve has been an incredible, dedicated servant to the state and has not received any bonuses or any raises of any sort over the salary that he began with. And as a consequence, has been really subsidizing the office that he holds. Because if we go out in this market, we're going to find out that the salary is being commanded by people with commensurate experience, level of integrity, and the skills and education that Steve has is commanding a greater salary. So we're going to need to discuss that along with the contract amount. And what I am suggesting at this point is that the council approve the staff to enter into a contract with Hoopendahl and Associates and proceed forward to negotiate the terms and conditions in accordance with New Mexico law. With that said, Madam Chair, I would make a motion to approve the staff entering into a contract negotiations for final approval by this council, or with the approval of the staff after going through the state investment the state process for approval of that contract.
Thank you, Member Summer, and I'm sure there's going to be discussion and questions on this motion. So before I take that motion, I'm going to open it up to the council. So Member Summer has outlined the process that is in this council's bylaws for hiring the state investment officer. And they are proposing to enter into a contract with Hoopendahl and Associates, which is the search firm that helped us find our chief investment officer, Vince Smith. And so we're going to open it up for questions. I'm going to start with Member Allen.
Just a couple other comments. Hoopendahl is the probably the most well-known firm that specializes in hiring state investment officers, CEOs. This is their field. They've been in it for 20 years. So it's not just that they were great at bringing us Vince, but this is their field. They've worked with state investment councils across and other pension funds across many states. I think they have 47 different clients. So this is their field. They're specialists in this. They know a lot of people in this field. And one of the things we ask about, is how do we stand versus attracting talent? Because it's very likely the talent may come from out of state, not necessarily from in-state. And they said there are 4 things that you really have to have, and that we've got them all, or at least we're close on. We have 3 of them and close on 4. One was a strong governance model, having a governance committee, having a governance policy. The second was having financial health. And as Steve just said, 45 billion is a pretty nice number, and our results have been quite excellent compared to other state investment councils. Third is geographic location. And we all know that Santa Fe and New Mexico is a fabulous place to move to in the lifestyle that we have here. And so that may be attractive to people. And then the fourth is competitive compensation and relocation packages. And one of the things that did come out in our discussions with Hudipol is to try to find, it's likely that there's an expectation that there would be some kind of relocation package. We might not call it that. It may be called something else. It's something that we may have to consider. So did I leave anything out, Kurt? They were very impressive in what they've done.
Madam Chair, that summary that Ms. Allen presented is accurate, and the states basically what they think the criteria are going to be for finding a qualified candidate.
Member Summer, before we go on, can you remind us what the cost of this contract is going to be?
The minimum fee that they're proposing is $65,000 plus costs, and they are asking up for, it would be part of a third of the proposed first year salary of the candidate. He was flexible in working on the third, but the minimum $65,000 was a pretty firm number. So I anticipate that it's going to be somewhere above the $65,000, but what percentage we're able to negotiate, I think, needs to be negotiated and approved.
Madam Chair.
Member Messina.
Yes, I'm just want to question. My understanding would be the governance committee's role to negotiate that percentage, and I want to make sure, although everybody needs to be fully informed, and we intend to do that because I am a member of the committee, I wanted to point that.
So if I heard you right, Member Messina, what you're saying is the council is going to vote on this contract today, but that negotiated amount will be up to the governance committee to do?
That's my understanding, and correct me if I'm not correct.
For Summer or hold on, let's get an answer to this question really quick before you jump in, Member Bingaman. Can I get an answer to that question about the negotiation of that third of this?
In the bylaws, in the policies, it's the governance committee's responsibility to identify and hire a new state investment officer, and that includes negotiations and any relationships with the firms that we might use, but of course with the approval of the board, council.
Madam Chair, Kurt Summer, the language that I'm looking at says to manage the search and selection process of and succession planning function for the SIO and make recommendations to the SIC. So that, I believe, is the delegation of the authority from that charter of the governance committee.
Ultimately, this is Harold. Ultimately, everything would come to the council, if I understand correctly. In other words, the council would, and I don't think the council has to be personally don't believe the council has to be involved in the nuts and bolts negotiation of the contract with the consultant. I think that, we can, I would be very comfortable giving you the parameters, which you've just discussed, and then come up with a contract. And the question I have is, would that then need to be brought back to the council for our approval to approve what you've done, or is that would be giving you the permission to do that? I don't know the answer to that question.
Madam Chair?
How about just a compromise where we say we're approving today $65,000 contract and up to a third? So if it's negotiated lower than a third, it's fine. If it's higher than a third, that's something that we need to come back to the council.
Madam Chair, this is Kurt Summer. I believe that is exactly the authority that would be sufficient to delegate, not to exceed that amount. I think that the parameters are there, and that Mr. Hudapol would find we would be able to negotiate a contract within those parameters with Mr. Hudapol based on my conversations with him.
All right. So with that, we're going to hear from
Madam
Member
Chair?
Bingaman, I believe.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And, I'd be remiss not to say, I could probably talk for 3 hours about Steve and it wouldn't be sufficient. And now's probably not the time to do that. But I did just want to offer an observation about the search and, thinking about Steve, when Steve, I think, came into this role, he didn't have a background in public fund administration, right? But he had, I think, the highest level of integrity and professionalism and intelligence, and has done a superlative job on behalf of the state of New Mexico. And I just wanted to say, in terms of launching a national search, I have a little bit of concern about that, just in the sense that I hope we will emphasize and prioritize finding a candidate in New Mexico. I just think we have such tremendous talent here in the state. And I also think that this role is very distinct from, for instance, Vince's role, right? And it is much more involved in state, fiscal policy, budgets, legislative negotiations, presentations. And so it's just a very different role, I think, than a typical chief investment officer role. And I think we should be cognizant of that, and try to find someone who is steeped in some of those areas in the state of New Mexico who can fill that role.
Madam Chair?
Well said, Member Bingaman. Member Summer.
I concur with Mr. Bingham's comments. To the extent we could find somebody who understands state government and is qualified to fit that position, we'd be benefited by that. So I agree with Mr. Bingham.
And again, the company Hudapol does search for CEOs and the chief or state investment officers, not just the chief investment officer. We also talked about the fact that the skill sets needed, and that's one of the things they'll be interviewing members of the council for. What do we think are those skill sets that we need, which includes knowledge of the New Mexico legislature, an example, that will help feed the description of what the search that we're doing. And, as Steve exhibited, it's more of a CEO kind of position than it is that you have to be a former investment advisor, or you have to be knowledgeable about finance and investments, but not necessarily. It's those skills that the CEO has are the ones we're looking for.
Well said,
Madam Chair. This is
hold on,
Madam Chair.
Hold on. Yeah. So before Secretary Probst asks this question, I'm anticipating that he may. Doesn't anything over 60,000 have to be a procurement process? What process are we following?
Commissioner, this is Evan. Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead, Mr. Hand.
Good morning to all, and thank you for your time. The answer to the Commissioner's question, or Mr. Secretary Probst's question, forgive me, is yes, we are fine, and here's why. The SIC has a procurement code exemption. I believe, and forgive me, it's not in front of me, it's at 13-1-98C, and that's the NMSA. And what that provision provides is that the State Investment Council is exempt from procurement, i.e. RFP type processes, for 3 categories, of which 2 probably are perfect here. The first is for investment managers, and obviously Steve is the state investment officer who manages the office and the funds. Obviously that's his number 1 job, so that's pretty easy. But if you were uncomfortable with that analysis for any reason, the exemption to the procurement code also provides that the State Investment Council is exempt for anything investment related. And obviously hiring the state investment, I'll put investment in all caps, officer who runs the state investment office and manages our permanent investment funds is I would think, very clearly investment related. So I would respectfully submit that you, council members, are more than covered with respect to this procurement or potential procurement.
Are there any other questions on that? That was not Secretary Prop's question. I just anticipated he was going to make it.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah.
One other thing, and I didn't realize this until recently, even though I've been on the council before. The state investment officer's salary comes from the State Investment Council. It is not a government salary or from the regular government salary. So we pay it out of the SIC. And I think that's an important distinction.
All right, Steve, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, Commissioner, just this. I have given the Governance Committee the position description for the State Investment Officer. It's been very thoroughly written, and I hope it will be helpful.
Do we have to, Evan might be able to weigh in, if we're confronted with this issue of salary level, in order to get the right candidate to agree to come, do we have the power to pay an amount greater than the amount that Steve's getting? What my memory is that isn't the case, but I'd like to know, Evan or whomever, what happens? How can we pay more?
I'm going to be a little vague here because the answer is I'm not entirely certain, and often state personnel rules, regardless of position, will dictate the manner in which someone is paid, regardless of position. So generally speaking, in Steve's case, the State Investment Officer position is a position that fits within a pay band. It's an exempt position, but it fits within a pay band within state government. I am not, at this juncture, I can't tell you what that band is in terms of economics, but I would suspect that there may be some leeway, but there may not. And so, that would be something that would have to be flushed out by the Governance Committee as we go forward. There are DFA rules. Brent's nodding. We will face similar issues potentially with respect to Steve's compensation that we face with any employee at the State Investment Office. And I'm sure the council is very familiar with logistics and other things we have to navigate to do that. I guess Brent, to some degree, is the ASD, and he often is forced to navigate that. But so the answer to your question, Harold, is I suppose there's a chance. I doubt Steve is at the top of the band, and I say that because he always mentioned that he came in below his predecessor. And so I suspect he's not at the top of the band, but I sincerely doubt that the band is anywhere near the numbers that Mr. Summer referenced with respect to market and national candidates and so forth. That's probably the best I can do with your question, Member Lavender.
Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. If I could just interject one more thing. I think it's time that we, and maybe the governance committee is the place to start. My opinion would be that it's time that we see if we can get those kinds of rules changed for these kinds of positions. $44 billion that's a real number. That's a lot of money. And because of the importance to the state and the future of the state, I think it's important that we take a look at the possibility of being able to pay something closer to market rate for people who are managing these incredible funds. So anyway, that's another day. But I'd like to have the governance committee consider that at some point.
We definitely are. We met with the governor before on this topic, and she said, we'll come back my second term. So we have the full intentions to go back for all salaries and to look at the exemptions.
Madam Treasurer.
There's some numbers in the chat that Secretary Props put in there for the pay band 60, minimum 145. And there's a pay band 70 with the minimum 208,000, maximum 457,600. For me, I want to thank Mr. Moise for the short time that we've been able to work together. It's really important, whatever this council decides, that it's not only them understanding investments, but them understanding New Mexico relationships, New Mexico partnerships, and being able to build on the relationships with our state agencies. I have a retiree healthcare meeting that's starting now at 9:30, so I'm going to have to jump off. But I support whatever the council decides. I think talking to the governance group first and putting out all of the objectives or making sure those objectives are part of this search are really important for us to find the right person.
Madam Chair.
Member Messina. Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have another question for Evan. I think it's for Evan, whoever. If we find our candidate and their salary requirements exceed the band, what is the procedure to deal with that?
I would suspect that there is not a procedure to deal with that. I think you might have to petition the state personnel board. I think you might have to get all of the governor and DFA individuals to sign off on that. There may be a legislative component. So for all intents and purposes, as a substantive matter, I don't think that's a possibility, respectfully, Mr. Messina.
Thank you. Thank you, Evan.
Madam Chair.
Member Summer.
In our conversations with Mr. Hudapol, he believes that a qualified candidate could be found for in the $400,000 range. And I'm seeing in the chat that there is a maximum level that is apparently allowed of 457.6. So I think that if we could probably, based upon what Mr. Hudapol proposed to us, easily find a qualified candidate that would fall within those ranges. So if we proceed forward with that understanding, we certainly could make sure that we put that out in our prospective search.
Anything further on this motion?
Madam Chair, this is Brent.
Oh, yes, Mr. Shipp.
I would just add to the discussion and maybe to Evan's comments. As the council probably knows, the legislature and DFA / the governor keeps a very heavy eye on the salary part of our budget. And it's very likely if we go over the amount that's currently being paid that we're going to have to do a bar. So everybody needs to be aware of that, and that's going to require both LFC and DFA approval.
Madam Chair?
Member Messina.
Yeah. That's even if we're within the bandwidth, not if it's in excess of what we're paying now, but within that range, we still would have to do that, Brent?
Mr. Messina, that's a good question. Unfortunately, when they approve our budget, there's very little allowance for extra dollars within that. If you have any vacancy savings, which I'm not anticipating at this point in time because we're pretty close to the 26 funded employees, I guess we could get to the end of the fiscal year and have, vacancy savings that might be able to be used, but I don't think you'd want to enter into a contract and have it finalized without making sure that you have plenty of budget on the front end of that. You don't want to run the risk of not having enough at the end.
Anything further on this?
Madam Chair, I'd like to second Member Summers' motion.
Okay. So we have a motion by Member Summer to approve the contract with Hudipole and Associates for $65,000 plus a negotiated amount up to a third of the first year's salary. And so that's the motion before us. Unless there's any further discussion, we can take a roll call vote. Any further discussion? All right, Jolene, if you would take a roll call vote, please.
Madam Chair, you may want to include expenses as well.
I apologize. I apologize. Yeah, and are the expenses, do the expenses have a limit on them?
Madam Chair, they would not, although there are some better definitions about that. I mean, these would involve background checks,
Advertising.
Other things as far as advertising, although Mr. Hudipole has indicated that's very, very minimal. Travel expenses for the consultant to visit and do interviews, that type of thing. But again, much like the council approves certain investments to be negotiated subsequently by staff, I think that would be what we're looking for today.
Okay. So 65 plus expenses plus a negotiated up to a third.
Right.
Any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion, if we could take a roll call vote on this motion.
Okay, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Secretary Probst.
Yes.
Member Sommer.
Yes.
Member Messina.
Yes.
Member Allen.
Yes.
Member Tejas.
Yes.
Member Lavender.
Yes.
Member Bingaman.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 8 in favor.
All right. Let's move to agenda item 4A, any old or new business, any further business from the council? Hearing none. Reminder that the next regular meeting of the SIC is Tuesday, August 29th in Santa Fe. Charlie, do we have any public comment on agenda item 5?
Madam Chair, we do not.
All right, with that, I will take an adjournment motion.
And
I move we
just
adjourn.
one
Oh, excuse me.
question. And then that last meeting with Steve would be September the 26th, correct? In Santa Fe. That's right. Okay. So we have to plan something for that. So
I'm with you. I move we adjourn. I move we adjourn.
Okay, we have an adjournment motion. Not sure how to do this. Okay, we've got an adjournment motion and a second by Member Allen. Anyone in opposition to adjournment? Anyone in opposition? Hearing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.